What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben, and welcome back to the bench for a brand new episode here on Rivals and Adversaries, season number 2 for the F4U-1 Corsair. Today we're going to go ahead and jump into the kit and start doing some real work. So let's go ahead and get to it. Now, the first thing I want to go ahead and focus on today, guys, part cleanup and the cockpit. I want to add some wires. I want to do some scratch building. I want to get this thing looking a little bit more lived in. Eventually, I hope to get the rear tail wheel also scratch built, add in some wires and whatnot. But today I'm just focusing on the front part of the fuselage for that cockpit, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and just waste no time, jump right into our first time lapse with some part cleanup. I want to add in those wires. We're going to use some 0.3mm solder wire, scratch build up some details and get this thing going. So let's go ahead and dive on in, guys. Let's have some fun. All right, everybody, so we are back, and I gotta tell you, this is turning out to be a lot of fun. Adding in all the wires and the piping and all that, it's looking really, really cool. Dash 1 doesn't have a floor, so you're gonna be able to see right down to all the nuts and bolts of the entire cockpit, so that's actually pretty cool. One thing though, I feel that Tamiya kind of shortchanged us a little bit on some of the sidewall components. I have a throttle right here, which I believe is just molded into the wall, but it looks an awful lot like you're supposed to be able to plug something in there, and I just don't find a part. I don't see anything that's going to really help us out there, and I don't like the way it's actually molded into the sidewall. So instead, we're going to go ahead and scratch build one of our own. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some spares, and what I'm actually using is half of a wheel that I found off of some 1/72 scale aircraft. I'm just going to go ahead and cut it down to size, then I'm going to glue it down, and once it's kind of shaped up, I can go ahead and add in some details. And for that detail, I'm going to start off with just some extra pieces of styrene. I went ahead and punched them out of some styrene plastic card, and we're going to add in a little bit of 3D detail coming off of that throttle quadrant itself. I also want to go ahead and add in some wiring at some point, and also levers and handles. I think it's going to add in a little bit of spice there to it. Honestly, so far so good. It is awesome, but I really think Tamiya could have done a little bit better here with some of the parts molded into the side of the aircraft. So let's go ahead and fix that up here and make it look a little bit better. Now, once we have that all finished up, I'm going to also go ahead and add in a little bit more of the piping. Now, I've got a 0.6 millimeter solder wire right here that I'm going to use for a larger diameter hose of some sort. I don't really know what it's designed to be, but I see it in my references. And I got to tell you, the actual Dash 1 Corsairs, since it doesn't have a floor, you're going to see all the little nuts and bolts and all the wires and the hydraulic cabling, and it's a real mess down there. So I'm going to go ahead and add in as much as I can, but seeing as this is only a model, you're not going to see everything. But a little bit here and there goes a long way. I'm also going to go ahead and add in even more wires there on the instrument panel. I've actually added in a ton of wires on the pilot's right-hand side. So now we're going to add in some stuff on the pilot's left-hand side. And honestly, all I'm going to do is bundle together maybe about 4 or 5 strands of 0.3 millimeter solder. And then we're going to drill a hole down through the top of this instrument panel and just feed those wires right down through. Then once I have that kind of secure in there, I can glue it down and I can kind of just meander them anywhere I want there in the cockpit. So I think it's going to be a good plan. Now that I have that drilled in place, I'm not going to go ahead and secure them to the other parts of the cockpit just yet. I want these a little bit more kind of draping down and kind of slowly moving around to the back of the cockpit. So I'm not going to go ahead and glue them into anything just yet, but I will eventually have to go ahead and glue them down to something. And in that case, I'm probably going to go ahead and tack them to the undersurface of the cockpit itself. Maybe behind the seat, maybe some of the bulkheads or whatnot. You're not going to really be able to see all that well. Kind of hide them around different places. Again, there are so many parts and pieces and all that exposed there in the real life Dash 1 Corsairs. I wanted to try to artistically represent that as best as I could. To give you an idea what we're going to do with this, I have the front and the back part of the cockpit just held together by my fingers, and you can see I can grab these little wires here and I can go ahead and move them and meander them all over the cockpit anywhere I want, and that's going to be perfectly fine. Plus I can paint them, I can go ahead and glue them down, and we'll be looking good. Now to give you another idea here, let's go ahead and kind of tuck this into the fuselage, and I'm going to go ahead and close it up, and I can hopefully try to show you what I'm going after here. So let's go ahead and just put these two parts together. The friction here should actually keep the cockpit nice and tucked up inside. If held at different angles, you can kind of see down into the cockpit well itself, and then we can see all the wires and the different scratch-built parts and details that I've added. So yeah, pretty cool. I like it. Now moving along here back to these sidewalls, we're going to go ahead and add in a couple of extra details here. I've already added in what I believe to be some form of pump, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of recontour a couple of the built-in details. There's this lever right here, and it's supposed to have a circular faceplate on it. Instead, it's got this strange kind of rectangular faceplate. So I'm going to go ahead and glue on a punched out piece of styrene. Then we're just trim down the kit part just to fit this piece of styrene, glue everything down, and I think we'll be good to go. I don't know what these parts are, but I think it's going to look a whole lot better and a bit more accurate. So I think it's a good idea. And of course, back onto the throttle, I'm going to go ahead and stretch in a few extra wires here and trim things down just to make sure we have a little extra life to this. Again, I'm loving this detail that we have here in the cockpit. Is actually really, really nice. And I'm probably going a bit overboard because you're not going to see half of it, but I want to try to add in a little bit of my own personal flair. And this is a great and very easy upgrade to do. So let's go ahead and jump onto our last time lapse here of the video, and we're going to work on the engine. Now, I don't typically add in plug wires to engines. If you're building like an inline engine, everything is hidden away behind the cowling. In this case, though, this is a radial engine and it's a beefy radial engine as well. So you're going to see a lot of the parts and pieces there on the very front of the engine. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use the kit parts here, and I'm going to add in some plug wires that are going to go from the very front of the engine all the way to each of the cylinders. And for that, we're going to use some 0.3 millimeter solder. We're going to drill in each of the openings there for every cylinder we have. There'll be 2 wires that are going to go to each cylinder. We'll go ahead and do the front bank and then the rear bank, and I think we'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and jump back into that time lapse, guys. Let's really push on. Let's get these plug wires in there and see how it looks. All right, let's keep it going. And we are back, everybody. As you can see, I've got our finished wired project up here with our instrument panel. You can tell just all the wires we've added in here. It looks great, a little bit more zoomed in, but honestly, by the time you get everything buttoned up and tacked into place, you'll probably miss a lot of the detail. But it doesn't matter because I had fun doing it, and it's going to add a little bit of life in here, especially if someone kind of shines a flashlight down into the cockpit. As you can see, though, this actually fits really, really well. This will glue on here to the front of the instrument panel. And then again, we've got our scratch build details and our wires. I'm not always sure what parts are what, but adding in a little bit extra things here and there really does add some life and some interest to the cockpit, makes it look a bit more lived in. For example, I don't know what this is supposed to be on the side here, but I saw it in my references. It's kind of like a little bottle with a gauge at the front of it and a wire coming off the back of it. So that's what I went ahead and scratch built here. It's not perfect. It's going to at least give you the idea that something's there and that it's useful. Let's get you a close-up here of the throttle. As you can see, we went ahead and added in some wires, and I think this looks a lot better than what we had here in the kit. I don't think it's 100% accurate, though. I think the real Corsair throttles are a little bit smaller, not so bulky. But again, I'm working with what I have here, and I wanted to use the very basic part of the throttle that's already molded in. I think it actually looks a lot better. Also, for the other side of the cockpit, we've added in some smaller wires, and I don't really know what these parts are, but I wanted to add in some wires to there. And I think, honestly, once everything is put together, you're going to see just a tiny bit of these wires, and it should give it a little bit more lived-in appearance. If we go ahead and give you a real quick kind of test fit of all the different cockpit parts put together, minus the control stick, of course, we can actually see a lot more in there. This actually has really good fit here, guys, honestly. And the details aren't terrible. They're actually really nice. But like I said, I wanted to add in a little bit more of my own personal flair. And as you can see, different angles, you do notice those wires hanging below. I think this actually adds a lot more interest to the cockpit, really kind of brings it to life. And even though the cockpit detail is actually pretty good, this just adds a little bit of icing. So I think well worth the time and effort. Now the next thing, of course, is painting it, which is going to be a whole nother bag of worms for sure. Now for the engine, I don't normally add in plug wires like I've mentioned before, but I think this really does kind of add some interest and life. Now I don't know how accurate the engine is, but it looks fine from my eyes. And this is what it looks like with the cowling kind of plugged into place. Again, you're going to see the majority of it. You're not going to see every little bit in detail, but I like how it looks and it definitely adds some life to that area. But that about does it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here. This is an awesome model kit. I'm having so much fun so far. We've added in tons of little scratch built details, and of course, we've added in our wires. So I am really digging how this kit's coming together, and we are going to be back next episode where I'm hoping to go ahead and do some priming and painting done on all these different parts, maybe do some scratch building there on that rear tail wheel. So until then, guys, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. Make sure to go drop on by Joe's channel, check out what he's doing on his A6M3, and we'll see you back here next episode for more of our F4U-1 Corsair here on Rivals and Adversaries, season number 2. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.